Okay, so Elon Musk is now fighting back against the not-for-profits that have been claiming that there is more hate speech on Twitter. He's threatening to sue the Anti-Defamation League for $22 billion for falsely accusing X, which is formerly known as Twitter, and Elon of being anti-Semitic. He's also suing some other not-for-profits for claiming that there is a whole bunch of hate speech on Twitter, and he's been fighting this fight for the past 6 months. But unfortunately, there are so many advertisers who are believing this because the mainstream media is pushing this. He is now, I think, been forced into a box where he's had to now try to sue these not-for-profits to stop them from just saying things that allegedly are not true. Let's get into it. So when Elon first bought Twitter, there was a huge bunch of concerns that there would be a rise in hate speech on the platform. Now, the reason why people were allegedly concerned about this was because Twitter was, let's just call it what it was left-leaning. And it was over-moderating kind of right political speech, but under-moderating left political speech. So you could say things that were right-wing and get banned and things of that nature. But if you said things that were left-wing, they would be more understanding of your point of view. So Elon took the platform and said, hey, you know what? We want to moderate this thing pretty much evenly across the board. Left-wing speech, right-wing speech. We don't want to moderate political speech, but we're going to stop hate speech, but political speech we're going to be a little bit more open to. And we're going to bring back some of those people who may have said things that were politically not woke in this era, but we're also going to not allow people to just, say things that were crazy and harass the people. So essentially what Elon did was keep the same moderation policies, but just massage them a little bit to make it more even-handed to both sides. So here is what the Anti-Defamation League said at the beginning when Elon first bought it, and they obviously had concerns about, hate speech becoming more prominent on Twitter. Here is the CEO of the Anti-Defamation League explaining his meeting with Elon and how Elon was attentive to their needs and their concerns. Check this out.
So while we have been concerned, and I've expressed it on this show, where would Elon take the platform? I've now had several conversations with him. He held an audience, not just with me, but I brought together other civil rights leaders from our Stop Hate for Profit coalition. And, actions speak louder than words, but I'm encouraged by what I heard this week.
You are? Okay. Can you give us some color on that?
Sure.
What did you hear?
Sure. So, first and foremost, privately and then in the larger group, he told me and the cohort, which included the NAACP, Color of Change, Free Press. By the way, the George Bush Presidential Center, not exactly bleeding heart liberals, Joe, and the Asian American Foundation, we all came together, and he said, number one, I am not going to re-platform people who've been kicked off the service until we have a clear and transparent process. More than that, I will not do it until after the election results are certified. Secondly, he committed to maintaining the election integrity effort to make sure that disinformation doesn't prevail on the platform in the days around the election. And then finally, he recommitted to a content moderation platform council and offered to include us in it. But more than any of that, Joe, he then tweeted out what we talked about publicly. So look, like I said, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I still have a lot of concerns, but I was really encouraged that he took the meeting, that he listened earnestly. I would tell you, like, he was very present for the whole conversation. And then he did what he said he was going to do. That's a lot more than I've seen from Mark Zuckerberg, that I've seen from other tech CEOs. I'm glad that Elon did it.
Now, you would think that would be great for Twitter and for Elon, but the narrative had kind of already been set, where the mainstream media was saying, hey, there's a rise of hate speech, rise of hate speech, rise of hate speech. Twitter's a cesspool, a cesspool, a cesspool. Get out, get out, get out. To the point where advertisers were leaving Twitter in droves. And a couple of months in, more than half of Twitter's top 1,000 advertisers stopped spending on the platform. And the reason was because the narrative had been set that Twitter was this bastion of hate speech because Elon said we're going to moderate both left and right-wing speech the same, right? Hate speech is one thing, but political speech that you just don't agree with isn't hate speech. So they started doing that. Even to the point where the mainstream media just started outright saying that there was more hate speech on the platform, even without any evidence. So Elon started doing interviews with reporters. Like, here's one with a reporter from the BBC. Now, in this interview, you're going to see Elon challenge this reporter from the BBC. And he is essentially going to say, hey, where is the evidence that you've seen that there's more hate speech just from your own feed? And this guy is going to say he's seen it, then he's going to say he didn't see it, then he's going to point to all these other companies that say there is. But Elon's going to push back and say, if you don't have any evidence that there's any more hate speech, why are you reporting this thing to millions of people? Why are you saying this to millions of people? This doesn't make any sense. And stop doing it. Stop doing it. But again, listen to this back and forth, and you'll see that this reporter is trying to push a narrative, even with Elon in a room. And when Elon eventually pushes back, you'll see he has to concede the point. Well, I don't really see any more hate speech. But even though the BBC is reporting that there's a whole bunch of hate speech. Check this out.
I've spoken to people very recently who were involved in moderation, and they just say there's not enough people to police this stuff, particularly around hate speech in the company. Is that
what hate
speech
speech are you talking about? I mean, you use Twitter,
right?
Do you see a rise in hate speech?
I mean,
just a personal anecdote. Like, what do you? I don't.
Personally, my for you, I would see I get more of that kind of content. Yeah, personally, but I'm not going to talk to the rest of for the rest of Twitter.
So you see more hate speech personally?
I would say I would see more hateful content in that.
Content you don't like or hateful? What do you mean to describe a hateful thing?
Yeah, I mean, just content that will solicit a reaction, something that may include something that is slightly racist or slightly sexist, those kinds of things.
So you think if something is slightly sexist, it should be banned?
No,
is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying anything. I'm saying.
Well, I'm just curious. I'm trying to understand what you mean by hateful content, and I'm asking for specific examples. And you just said that if something is slightly sexist, that's hateful content. Does that mean that it should be banned?
Well, you've asked me whether my feed, whether it's got less or more. I'd say it's got slightly more.
That's why I'm asking for examples. Can you name one example?
I honestly don't use. Honestly, I
don't. You can't name
a
single example.
I'll tell you why. Because I don't actually use that for you feed anymore. Because I just don't particularly like it.
But you
said actually, a lot of people are quite similar. I only look at
hang on a second.
my
you said you've seen more hateful content, but you can't name a single example, not even one.
I'm not sure I've used that feed for the last 3 or 4 weeks. And
then how did you see the hateful content?
Because I've been using Twitter since you've taken it over for the last 6 months.
Okay, so then you must have at some point seen for you hateful content. And I'm asking for one example.
Right.
And you can't give a single one.
And I'm saying
then I say, sir, that you don't know what you're talking about.
Really?
Yes, because you can't give me a single example of hateful content, not even one tweet, and yet you claimed that the hateful content was high.
Well,
that's false.
No, what I claimed.
You just lied.
What I claimed was. There are many organizations that say that kind of information is on the rise. Now, whether it has on my feed or not, I mean, right, and
literally
you can
name
something
one.
Like the Strategic Dialogue Institute in the UK. They will say that. So
look, people will say all sorts of nonsense. I'm literally asking for a single example, and you can't name one.
Right, and as I already said, I don't use that feed. But
then how would you know that?
I don't think this is getting anywhere.
You literally said you experienced more hateful content, and then couldn't name a single example.
Right, and as I said,
that's absurd.
I haven't actually looked at that feed.
Then how would you know there's hateful content?
Because I'm saying that's what I saw a few weeks ago. I can't give you an exact example. Let's move on. We only have a certain amount of time.
So you see, I can't give you an example. I've not seen it. That's something I saw a few weeks ago. So, okay, so give me the example. Well, I don't really use the feed. Well, if you don't use the feed, how do you know it's there? Well, I think I saw it. I don't know. Let's just move on. Let's just move on. This is a reporter from the mainstream media, from the BBC. Just straight up lying. Straight up. Not even because he's, again, feeding the narrative that Twitter is the bastion of hate speech, even though he doesn't have one example. And remember specifically what he was claiming, right? I've seen more. That's why I stopped using that feed. I've seen more. Okay, give me one example. Crickets. I can't give any more examples. So now, even though they couldn't point to examples, even though there was nothing there, right? Even though he's gone to the media and say, show me the examples. You're saying there's more there. Show it to me. Just give me something. There was nothing there. And they continued to push the fact that there was more hateful content on Twitter, even though they couldn't show any examples or anything, right? So what happened? Well, ad sales continued to drop 59%. 59%. People were just leaving Twitter, not because of the fact that there was more hateful content, because that wasn't true, just because of the perception, just because of the narrative. And if the mainstream media is putting that narrative out there to everybody, then obviously advertisers are going to take their money out because they don't want to be seen as supporting hateful content. So what do you do if you're Elon? What do you do if you're Elon? You know, it's just, what do you do? So then guess what? The Anti-Defamation League then comes back and says this.
Go through the grades, but maybe even before you do the grades, how you came to them. How are you measuring these companies?
So, look, the ADL's been tracking hate, for over 100 years, and now we see social media has really become the super spreader of hate and harassment. We do annual polls, and we found that this year, more than 52% of Americans report receiving abuse, being harassed on these platforms. I mean, that's over half of their adult users in America. So those numbers are astounding. And actually, 4 out of 5 people who've seen violent threats directed at them receive no feedback, no support from the platforms at all.
Why don't people stay on these platforms if it's nothing?
I think these platforms have become so integrated into our lives, right? It's how we shop, it's how we socialize, it's how we search for information. And yet, again, they are vectors of abuse. And these are some of the most sophisticated, profitable companies in the world. I mean, think about Snapchat. It's got an $18 billion market cap, doing amazing things with, 500 million users, and yet we give it an F. Because you can't get real-time support if you're harassed. You can't batch report if you've experienced, hate. Simple things they could do.
I want to dig into what hate represents because I think it's a question.
Sure.
But this is Linda Yaccarino, the new CEO of X, formerly Twitter, just 8 hours ago, posting the following. She says, free expression and platform safety are not at odds. Is that true? Is that possible?
That certainly seems to contradict what we're seeing on almost all of these services. Now, look, they announced their reorg at X yesterday, and now Linda is in charge of trust and safety. That's a good thing because she understood how to handle these issues, I believe, at NBC Universal. But the truth is that what we're seeing on Twitter, X, today is really alarming.
So as you can see, the ADL is saying, hey, there's issues with Twitter, and it's extremely alarming. Now, that also is going to hurt Twitter's bottom line. Obviously, people are going to leave the platform, and advertisers are going to, if this guy who's been looking at hate speech for over 100 years, his company, at least the ADL, is saying that it's extremely alarming what's going on in Twitter. So what did Elon do? Elon says enough's enough. We're going to sue these companies who claim that there is hate speech on Twitter without any evidence. Check out this report.
Brewing with X. That's the company formerly known as Twitter. They are at the center of it. X has filed a legal claim against the Center for Countering Digital Hate, or CCDH. The company announced the news late last night on its blog, claiming that the CCDH has, quote, been actively working to assert false and misleading claims, encouraging advertisers to pause investments on the platform.
So Elon is suing them for doing the same thing the ADL is doing. Just claiming that there's more hate speech, but not really showing any evidence that it's been increased or decreased from when the people who the ADL liked before had it. Now, as this report from the New York Post says, in May, the organization, the ADL, found that 65 accounts, now mind you, Twitter has millions and millions of accounts, but it says 65 accounts that were previously banned from the platform for violations of hate speech policies had been reinstated. So this is why, they're losing millions of dollars. The ADL claimed although the reinstated accounts themselves rarely post explicit anti-Semitic content, these were anti-Semitic tropes, veiled attacks, and conspiracy theories among their networks of followers. So this is over 65 accounts. In March, another ADL report said that X was not enforcing its own content moderation policies and Musk wasn't deboosting or demonetizing hateful tweets as promised. So ADL just went straight after Twitter. And again, this was hurting Twitter's bottom line because advertisers don't want to advertise on a platform that's allegedly spreading hate. So as you can see from the New York Post, Musk, he had to sue the Center for Countering Digital Hate, which we just saw, and damaging X's relationship with advertisers. And now Twitter is coming on by saying, by all objective metrics, X is a much healthier and safer platform than it was a year ago. This is before Elon bought it. So Twitter, now X, is saying if you look at all the data, we are actually better than we were before Elon took over. But that's not what's being told, right? What's being told is that it's not. Several top advertisers have boycotted X, Twitter, since Musk took over, including Audi and Pfizer. In May, a fidelity valuation severely marked down the value of the social media site from $44 billion Musk paid last October to $15 billion just 6 months later. That's a lot of money lost. Fidelity's own stake in the platform also plunged from nearly $9 million at the time of Musk takes over to nearly $6.5 million as of April 28. So I think Musk has essentially no choice. I think he has no choice. I think if people aren't looking at the data, if people don't care about the truth of the matter, and if they're just going to say that there's more hateful content without any substance behind it, then what do? You have to sue them to say, stop saying these things, or at least provide me the proof of why you're claiming these things to be true. You can't just make it all up, destroy my business, and then say, hold on, you're against free speech because you're not allowing me to defame you. It's a weird world we live in, but, let me know what you think about this whole Elon Musk thing, because again, I feel sorry for Elon, but, it's a shame because this channel, and when we evaluate like when the media tells stories like the U.S. soccer story and all these other stories that they push that are straight up false narratives. And when you say, okay, well, here are the facts behind the story. And I think so many people just believe the mainstream media because they're so used to believing it. And I thought the mainstream media would take a huge hit after Depp v. Heard because so many people saw, for instance, that Amber Heard was lying, but the media, even till today, is pushing that she was the victim. She was the one that was wrong. So it's a weird world we live in, but hopefully Elon can get some justice because right now, X is being destroyed. And it's not because of any facts, logic, or evidence. It's because of narratives, how people feel. Let me know where I'm wrong in the comment section. Let me know if you think, Elon is right to be suing these people. I think he is, and I hope he's successful because I don't think this is right. That he essentially has the same moderation policies as before. He's essentially doing, the company by all objective measures seemingly is better than it was before, but that doesn't matter. It's what people feel. And if people feel like it's worse, then that's what it is. And even like when he had that BBC reporter on, that guy didn't have any facts. He didn't have any evidence. He just said what people feel. And that's what millions of people are going to hear. Let me know in the comment section how you feel. My name is Nate the Lawyer, and I'll see you next time. Peace.